have to figure out how this works for you, how you can take these ideas and examples and turn them into something that you can use. But hopefully this will give you some food for thought. So what are the ways in which you turn the principle of intrinsic motivation into practice? We can make a basic distinction between, I'm going to say, the micro and the macro. Take the micro side first. At a micro level, what do I mean? I mean that every individual employee, from the frontline worker all the way to the very top, the frontline employee is stimulated to varying degrees to do their work well. And the biggest single factor that determines how stimulated they are is their immediate boss. And that is a kind of a truism, because the boss is the person who sets the agenda. The boss is the person who creates the kind of the climate, the microclimate in which we all work. The boss is the person who, makes our life very easy or very tough or very exciting or very stimulating. So when we're trying to get intrinsic motivation through an organization, ultimately what we're trying to do is to get the quality of line management in that organization working at a higher level. We're trying to get line managers to understand and to deliver on those basic principles of making work exciting and engaging for their employees. My definition of management, the one I like most, is, management is about enabling people to do their best work. And there's no kind of secret recipe here. The basics of getting people to do their best work are known very well. You give people a very clear challenge, a very clear sense of what they are meant to be doing, how their work fits into the bigger picture. You give them a lot of space, autonomy in which to work. You give them an opportunity to figure for themselves how to deliver on the assignment you've given them. And then you provide them with support. And support means, sometimes it means giving them challenges, pushing them to do things they didn't realize they could do. Sometimes it means giving them resources, the information they need, the necessary kind of colleagues to work with. And sometimes it means helping them to solve a few problems they can't solve themselves. And so this basic model of giving direction, providing space, enabling them through support, this has been known for decades. The problem is that, of course, we don't, again, consistently do it. So, ultimately where you want to end up with is high-quality managers throughout the organisation, people who understand these basic rules, and you want to find a way, essentially, of evaluating and measuring and improving people's management performance. I don't mean their task performance, I mean their management performance, using these basic ideas. So that is ultimately where you're trying to get to. Now, it takes many years to change the quality of management in an organisation. So I want to then go to what we might call the macro part of the story, which is to say, what can you as a management team do? What are the processes or initiatives that you can put in place to start to moving your organisation in that right direction? A significant chunk of it is about essentially taking away problems. So most big companies are over-engineered. So my starting point would always be, let's see what we can actually remove in terms of formal processes or systems or operating procedures which are getting in the way. Sometimes we have overly complex matrix structures. Sometimes by taking away some of that multi-layers of accountability, we actually simplify tasks and help people to focus on the things that matter. So my point number one is always a story around simplification in order to get rid of all the forest, the woods around you, so that you can start to see the forest as a whole. Point two would be to, can we say, rethink or at least clarify what the purpose of the organisation is. I mean, it is a kind of a truism, again, that companies which have a very clear sense of identity, a sort of a higher order vision or mission, and are able to articulate that across the organisation, they're the ones where people give of themselves more. They become more energised, they understand better what their job is, how it fits to the bigger picture. So I would often say, is there something we can do to clarify our overall purpose. Now, at a higher level, it's very clear what Dong Energy is in the business of doing, and I don't think that needs restating. But remember that high sense of where you're trying to get can be cascaded, and each division or each function can create its own kind of mini sense of purpose. I'll give you an example of that towards the end of my remarks. So if number one is around decluttering and simplifying, point number two is around having a much clearer sense of purpose. Point three is around finding ways of making the collective goals of the organisation operational. In other words, we have to find a way of ensuring that this well-intentioned statement that we're all working together actually has some sort of merits to it, some sort of teeth. BP is an organisation which is also in all sorts of trouble these days, but wind the clock back 10 years, and BP was a very, very impressive company. Perhaps some of you even used to work for the company, I don't know. But I know the folks at BP very well, and in that period, a decade or so ago, one of the very impressive things they did was they created a very exciting kind of process of peer review, peer assist, whereby people collaborated with each other very effectively to solve problems, to share knowledge, and so forth. And for me, the enabling factor there was the basic concept of creating what they call peer groups, whereby the person running deep sea drilling in the North Sea was 50% accountable for his or her performance of his business unit, but 50% of his accountability was for the performance of the other deep sea drilling units in Angola or the Gulf of Mexico or wherever it was. And indeed 50% of his or her bonus was a function of the performance of the rest of the peer group. And you may or may not like the specifics of that example, but think of it conceptually as saying, is there some sort of simple way of ensuring that a collective goal has some sort of impact on my performance? Am I being evaluated and measured and ultimately perhaps even rewarded in a way that actually fits with these collective objectives? Many companies, investment banks are famous for this, talk a lot about collaboration, but all the incentives are around my individual contribution. And as we know, that is a very, very dangerous path to go down. So the third point then is around collective goals and measures. And then my fourth thing that we can think about as a way of trying to enable these basic principles of motivation to work is, it's very often the case that we can create specific initiatives, projects, call them what you will. These are often temporary things. They're task focused. They might well be cross-functional projects designed to deliver on a particular objective, but they are often a very effective means of getting cross-functional teams together to work in ways they haven't done before, to ensure that they collaborate better than they have been doing before, and also in a way that is actually very motivating. A lot of good people get very sick of organisations where they are stuck in their day job, they can't see any opportunity to progress, and it's often the case that by giving them an opportunity to something else alongside their day job, that becomes a motivator in itself. So I've seen a lot of companies use these sort of cross-cutting projects, activities, initiatives, call them what you will, as an enabling device to kind of get the ball rolling on some bigger targets. And also to get people actually more excited about their work. Very often people will say, when you ask them what's the most exciting thing about your work, they will almost always point to some very specific project that they did, rather than the sort of day-to-day work that they've been doing. So as I say, there's no simple solutions, and there never are. Let me finish with one brief example. I do a lot of work with Roche, the pharmaceutical company, and a chap, I'll name him, his name is Jesper Ek. He has been running the diabetes care unit within Sweden, and I know him very well. I worked with him 3 or 4 years ago, and he took over a failing unit. It was a unit with 20% employee engagement, and indeed he was given the job because he had shown himself to be quite creative and thoughtful about trying to rethink how things were done. And in the space of 15 months, he's managed to move that unit, it's about 50, 60 people, from being kind of one of the lowest performers to being one of the highest performers. And as I say, no surprises here, but let me just take you through the kind of the three-stage process of what he did. His first thing was to say, we admit that things aren't working, to sort of hold up a mirror to his face, the face of his team, and to say we are not doing well, and to say we need to take a step back and clarify our role. So he defined a new vision for that little unit within diabetes care in Sweden. Second thing he did was he said, for the next couple of months, I am going to work on almost like a one-to-one basis with you. I'm going to focus on you, your job, the things that make you motivated, the things that make you dissatisfied. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time worrying about the actual objective indicators of performance. And he bought himself a little bit of time with his boss to make sure that he had a license to do this. And so for that 2 or 3 months, he met, a couple of hours at a time with each of the people, just trying to make sure he understood what made them tick, and obviously for them to realise that he was dead serious about this. And then once he'd done that, he turned his attention to the task side of the story. And he worked with the team, obviously getting their buy-in and engagement and support, to actually rethink the product strategy for this group. And this process, of course, then led to some much more specific initiatives about things that they were going to focus on and things they were going to stop doing, and to some agreement, obviously, around the measures by which they would determine how successful they were being at delivering on that higher order objective that he had set. So very, very simple. And as I say, he just contacted me last week, and he's moved now to being one of the highest performing units within the diabetes business worldwide. Now, it's a small group, it's 50 people. If you've got 50 people working for you, you can personally get to know every single one of them. But, you imagine it doesn't take much to take that sort of approach and roll it out, across 10 or 20 different parts of the organisation, and soon you've reached real critical mass. So I'm going to finish there. Obviously, it's up to you to figure out how you pursue any and all of these sort of ideas. Obviously, I'd be delighted if you'd buy copies of my book and take a read of this, but frankly, this 20-minute summary is probably all you need, because I'm focusing on the bits which are probably relevant to you. And hopefully, you will get some value out of these ideas, and you will have now a productive dialogue and exchange and discussion to see if you can help make some big improvements in your way of working. If you've got any questions or follow-up suggestions or questions from me, please let me know. Nell will give you my email address, and I'd be happy to speak to you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you very much.